All right, and welcome back to the Beyond Coaching podcast. Today we're joined by Coach Joe Micela, founder of Performance One, a world-class strength and conditioning facility in Arizona known for producing elite-level Olympic weightlifters and developing athletes from youth to professional. Joe's been in the game for decades, coaching Olympians, world team athletes, and countless college-bound kids, while also building one of the most successful private performance gyms in the country. Today we're going to dive into his journey from college strength coach to private facility owner, what it really takes to survive multiple recessions, and how to build a business that lasts decades in the performance world. Joe, thanks for being here with us today, man.
Thank you, guys.
Absolutely. So, Joe, take us back. How did your career start in Olympic weightlifting and strength conditioning? What it all started?
I was a collegiate wrestler at Rutgers University and then at Arizona State University. And when I was at Rutgers, I met a guy who was like, hey, prior to that, all my strength and conditioning was powerlifting based. Growing up where I was in New Jersey, the weightlifting community was very small to non-existent in South Jersey, but powerlifting was pretty huge. So that was my foundation. When I got to Rutgers, I met a guy because we didn't have very good strength and conditioning. He was like, man, you're friggin' strong as shit. He's like, but you're missing an element of athleticism. And he started showing me some movements. He didn't show me everything, but he was just like started me. And that guy, his name is Jeff Newport. Ironically, Jeff is like left weightlifting and now is like a master level double kettlebell instructor. You know, he went the kettlebell route. But then when I got to Arizona State, their strength and conditioning staff didn't know what to do either. And I was like, well, I started learning this and I really like it. They were all powerlifting based and they were like, my bench is going up. And I'm like, who gives a shit? I'm in a sport where I got to do this. And I got to be able to move. I found a couple more people that were involved in Olympic weightlifting and I started studying it on the side. And the strength coaches were like, how the frig is this kid getting so big? Because he's not really following our program strong. And I was lucky enough to run into Roger Nielsen and Kevin Dibler. Roger Nielsen was our 1992 Olympic team coach who had retired from Chicago and was living in Arizona and was coaching a guy that happened to be friends with our strength coach. And they were training a couple of times. And I was like, oh, let me go figure out what's going on. So I had to sneak off and train with those guys because our strength coach was pissed about it. And I started learning it. And I thought I was going to be competing in it after wrestling. And that was like kind of my ambition. I was like, I want to do this as a sport. And we were doing it out of high school. And I just started, next thing you know, kids kept coming up to me and going, hey, can you help me with this? So I do a set and like 10 minutes later, I'm coaching a kid. And then I come back and I'm like, what the fuck? And then I come back. Next time my workout's taking 4 hours because I'm coaching half the kids. So finally I kind of said, I'm just going to coach. I said, I'm not really even that good at this. By the time I get good at it, I'm going to be like 50 and these kids are really good. So within the first year, we had a kids that went to junior nationals, medaled and made junior Pan Am team medal and junior world team. My first year really doing it. And I was like, okay, I had my career with wrestling. I'm like, I'm still going to work out, but I can't devote the time to this. Plus I was trying to coach and start a business and I was putting in a lot of hours. I'm like, I don't have time for this. And I was okay with that. I was okay with just being a coach. And then it really started that. And we just started grinding kids. We did a free after school program. I did it at nights after work. So I would work all day, about 10-hour day. And then I would coach for another 2-3 hours. I did that for a long time and then it just kind of started rolling.
Nice. Did you find at any point that you were like, hey, I want to try weightlifting competitively or kind of want to get into this? Or was it more just you were kind of purely for strength and conditioning for yourself?
I used strength and conditioning. And then I said, I thought I wanted to compete myself. I think I have like recorded one American Open meet. I did like nothing, but I just realized I just could not give it the time.
Yeah.
Then Roger moved. That was another big thing. So Roger moved back to Chicago because he had an opportunity to do something back there. And he was like, kind of like a coach mentor to me. And there wasn't a lot of other people at the time that I really trusted in Arizona to coach me. So then I was just like, all right, screw this. But, I think I would have did okay. I think I would have did pretty good if I started it. But I also had a lot of wrestling type injuries. I had a rotator cuff injury. I had a hip thing, so I'm like, I just didn't think I could handle the tonnage that was going to need it to do the weights. I was a heavyweight. So, you're talking, I'm getting into the sport later. The time for me to get to those kind of numbers, I would have had to put on such quantity of total on my I don't think my joints could have handled it. So I made that decision pretty early on to not compete. And even now, I coach a lot of people. They're like, you don't lift? But actually, the most thing that kind of kicked me in the balls the most was when I showed up to the Olympics in 2012 to coach, and I'm in like the general training center, doing a workout, and people are going, "Oh, when do you compete? When are you lifting? When are you?" I'm like, "Fuck, I'm not." I'm like, because I was still pretty kind of young at that point, but no, I'm okay with it. I honestly, I love coaching. I get the same adrenaline rush from coaching. So
Nice.
that's what was the difference between strength and conditioning. I still strength and conditioning is a primary thing we do, but I go, where am I going to get this adrenaline rush that I had with wrestling and competing? Oh, and this is nothing against powerlifting, but it's not the same. Like I've coached powerlifters. Actually, this Saturday we have a powerlifting meet, and I'm like, you warm them up, and then it's kind of like, okay, it's like being a swimming coach. It's like you did all the work prior, then you show up and you're just like in the stands. It's like, yeah, you make a little fine adjustments, but with weightlifting, you're involved. Like you're actively involved. So that was mine. But you get.
No, I think we lost you on the audio. Can't hear you. I think it's pulling from your phone. Is your microphone? You might just have to switch your mic to your computer. Should be on the right hand panel. There you go. Oh, we had you for a second there. Yeah.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I got a sick kid at home.
Very good.
I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. But I don't know. I forgot what I'm saying. But
No, it's all good. It's pretty much like you were trying to look for that adrenaline rush, but I can resonate. Powerlifting is so like you're gonna lift where you're gonna lift. Like
you're a team, and you hear these stories about Olympic weightlifters. They always talk a perspective about how like the athlete did everything, and it's like no, man. It's like the coach had to have at least for me. I don't know. I don't want to speak for Max, but like you had a strategy. You talked to your athlete, and like I've not been in a situation where I just said, "Hey, do whatever the fuck you want to do. I'm just here." Like I don't coach, so I go into a situation where I'm like, it's me versus Max. It's like we're playing a chess game, and then not to be like rude, but our athletes are the pawns of how to get that done. Now you have to have done the work. You have to have the trust in your athlete because I can make all the cool strategic moves and do all these crazy things, but if the athlete can't do what I'm asking them to do, then it's nothing. But that's why I fell in love with weightlifting over other disciplines because there was more of that, and I had to be on my game, from start to finish. And then I realized really good that there's really good coaches that can get you to the dance. Then there's really good coaches that suck at that, but then when they're at the dance, they're really good. Okay, and they're really good at competition strategy and competition platform coaching. And I've seen situations where I've had, not me personally, but I've had coach athletes that go, this is my primary coach, but on meet day, such and such takes over. I'm like, really? And they're like, yeah, he's just calm, cool, collective, or he or she, and they know me, they know what to do. And in some way, because they're not connected to me on a day-to-day basis, they just can make decisions that are in my best interest without getting emotional about it, and I was like, oh, okay, but I feel like I do pretty good at both.
Yeah. I think a lot of times too, it can go any number of ways, right? You get coaches that are, they believe they've crafted they single-handedly created someone's DNA, and everything that person's ever achieved in their life is their a byproduct of them, all the way to people that, will, as coaches, will almost do nothing and put almost no sort of their stamp on it. Like it's like, oh, it's all them. I didn't do anything. I think largely it's like people kind of downplay sometimes too what a coach's role is, where they'll say things like, the program doesn't matter and it's all about the environment and blah, blah, blah. And those are important, but I mean, it's really easy to not make progress in weightlifting. Like it's really, really easy. If you didn't want to get better, no problem. Anyone can achieve that. So I do think that coaching is something where, good coaches obviously shine because they're able to take somebody and get them to a level that they couldn't get to themselves. And that's something to be praised, but to be like, you gotta be aware of that. Like you're taking someone who maybe could be good and you're making them great, or maybe, they have problems, they have limitations, and you can spot that, you can see it and create the fix, create the program, find the solution. And it's one of those things where it seems from the outside very like, well, all he's doing is writing a program. But the reality is there's a lot of thought that goes into that, or there's a lot of thought that goes into the technique and the coaching and the management. And it's that like compounding lots of little things that become, it's like where the sum of the parts is greater, the sum of the parts is less than the whole. All that stuff together as a coach really elevates somebody that from the outside seems like, oh, well, all he's doing is he's writing sets and reps on a paper, right? Big deal. What do you feel like as yourself, kind of knowing this, you've coached Olympians, what is your sort of thought as far as like, is there something Joe Micela does that's dramatically different than anyone else? Or what is your sort of edge in the sense that like, you've got something that's the secret sauce for you?
I think what has been told to me by athletes that have been with me, who've been with me 10 years or have been with me 2 weeks, they say it's my intensity. And I get people to do things that they're not going to normally do. Okay. I call it, I'm a pusher. Okay. I will push them to get them. Now, in order to push somebody, you have to build somebody up. So in a lot of our cases, especially we've trained a lot of female athletes and a lot of males too, but in both situations, I get to know them. I get to know how they think and what ticks. And then I try to bring that out in them, through encouragement, through mindset, through little details. Because you could have the most physically, talented athlete. They don't believe in themselves. They ain't lifting shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, and I've had some other kids that weren't that physically talented, but they believed and they were able to achieve and they were able to grind on a consistent basis. They were able to grind on a consistent basis that just kind of really, they won by a kilo, you know what I mean? And that's all we needed that particular day. So there was a situation where I feel like I do that. I'm more intense, even I just told a new guy who does a new masters lifters came in here and I said, listen, you're 50 years old, I'm not going to yell at you and call you a stupid piece of shit, but you told me you want this as a goal. Okay. I am going to make your goal my goal. And I'm going to give you that kind of energy.
Love that.
And he was just like, he was shocked. And I gave that same kind of energy. And later that day, I had a 10-year-old, our youngest 10-year-old, who comes in and lifts weights because he's like, Coach Joe, I want to be really good. And I said, okay. Now, do I scream at a 10-year-old? No. But I have a certain standard. He understands that. Do I joke with the 10-year-old every once in a while so it makes it light so he understands I'm not a psychopath? Yes. But then I have people, like I said, I meet that, and then it takes time. Some people are like, this guy's fucking crazy. Or they'll go, they get it. What I mean? Like I said, and I tell coaches that too. I said, listen, you can't be telling dick jokes one day with the moment with the guy and, busting balls and go drinking with them and get shit faced. And then the next day ask them to do something they've never done before. And they're going to trust you knowing that you were shit faced 6 hours ago with them, or you're the guy telling them dick jokes in the corner. So you have to have that separation. And I made that decision pretty early on. Like, I don't go out and hang out with my athletes. We'll go to dinner. I don't drink. One, I gave up drinking 5 years ago. But at the same time, even when I did, I didn't drink with my athletes. I didn't get shit-faced with my athletes. I don't even do social activities with my athletes because I need them to see that there is a separation between a coach and your friend. I'm not your friend per se.
Yeah.
Can I be a confidant? Yes. Can I be this? Yes. I take on more of the father figure kind of role, not because of my age. I did that at 23. Okay. People were like, dude, this guy acts 5 years older than he is at 23 because I made an early on decision that in order for me to be successful, I had to do that because I was a young coach. As an undergraduate, I was given graduate level responsibilities at Arizona State. And I was given assistant coach responsibilities because we didn't have anybody. We had a coaching staff. We had over 300 something athletes at Arizona State. We had 3 coaches. And they were like, hey, dude, can you do this, this, and this, and this and work 80 hours a week? I'm like, yes, I can. And next thing you know, I did it. So I had to have really early on at 23, show that to younger kids that were literally my age at the time. So I had to have that. And I couldn't go out and like, hey, they just saw me at the bar 2 weeks ago. But even I pulled that into weightlifting. So I had that. So I'm able to push certain people and bring them out of despair. And when you see a kid or an athlete knows their coach got their back, they start doing this. They start puffing up a little bit, So it's more mental and mindset in that psychology. Because like I said, X's and O's and sets and reps, Max and I may look at our programs and go, holy shit, it looks exactly the same. Okay. But he has a different way of pushing his athletes that are different from mine. Same thing, like I said, and that's when I've traveled all over the world. I look at some of these programs, I'm going, there's nothing special to this. Now it's mindset, it's the kid and finding the right kid that goes into your program that says, all right, you can do this. I haven't been able to do what I call my full program since 2013. I've had to adapt, but I haven't been able to do what I was doing back in the day. One, I haven't had the athletes that could do it. You know what I mean? You just can't do it, but you have to kind of adapt to that. But I find a way to push kids. We've got a bunch of young kids right now that we're testing out the waters and seeing who can do it. Even my own son, he's an up and coming youth kid, he's not bad, you know what I mean? But I'm dad and I'm coach, and he doesn't know the difference. I'm actually the same person all the time, so it kind of sucks for him. But he's trying to figure that out. But he's not bad. But I can't push him. I do try to push him, but then I realize like I got to go home with this kid, so I got to be careful.
Nice.
I like what you said there about the whole coach athlete sort of professional relationship, because I think that those lines can for sure get blurred in the barbell sport industry. We don't treat barbell sports with the same level of professionalism that we treat like D1 or pro sports that are other, football, wrestling, whatever, right? And a lot of the times too, I find it's because I'll use my experience for example. I opened my gym when I was 20 years old. I started hiring coaches when I was like 22, 23. I was selling, getting clients on board that were my age or usually older. And then there's this whole community thing. Well, I'd be at the gym all the time. So all the athletes and people just became my friends in my social circle. And that had its own level of, issues that can bring and, relationships and things like that. So I love what you said about that, because I think that's huge. And setting that culture from the get-go is so important, because what I had to do was course correct later, and then people's feelings get hurt.
That's 10
Oh,
times
Zach
harder.
never hangs out with us anymore. Zach doesn't
Yeah.
want to hang out with us. He doesn't like us. All this type of
Yeah.
stuff, right?
Yeah, that's 10 times harder.
No. I was gonna say we did a podcast years ago with Jack Clark from the Cal Rugby, and he had a great thing. He said that the team is not a family. That this idea that your team, your club is a family is not something that they want to instill in the Cal Rugby team. And it was the idea that people kind of throw this around, this we're a family, we're a team, we're all we're this really tightly interconnected group is kind of can be a negative thing, because it's exactly what you said, where athletes seeing you as something other than a professional, right? And then it just starts to change the dynamic of everything. But at the same time, it's when you blend the idea of family with a sports team, it's really hard to sever those ties when someone does something they shouldn't do. When you've got hard, fast, clear boundaries and rules, you show up on time, you do this, you do that, you treat people this way. Someone starts to violate those or starts to get loose with things, or for whatever reason, behaves poorly. Breaking those ties becomes so much harder when there's this connection of this family element and this very blurry line that's not professional. It starts to cause tons of problems. I think you see a lot of clubs. I mean, we've been doing this for a long time, but you've probably seen a lot of clubs that have come and gone, that have risen and, gone up in flames because of that very thing. It's just too deep into the, hey, we're a big family, and that's the thing they're leaning on to get people to be part of it. How do you, I mean, you obviously have a pretty easy time doing it because you've done it so long. How do you feel you've kind of been able to keep those boundaries like that, like where you're able to not fall into that trap?
Well, over 25 years of doing this, you have pockets of, kids that come up together. And I just bumped in, we were at our WSO championship, and I just bumped into a girl that I trained 20 years ago. And she was like, oh, that was a great crew that we had. And, they were at that time, there were a bunch of 20-year-olds that were all training, and they were grinding, they were winning medals. And then they moved on. And then there was another younger group that came up, and then the younger group and the high school kids. And then, each group of kids. And, I always said, you guys can be friends. I wasn't big about people dating on the team, but you guys can stay friends. If anything, it was a good thing, because then they could find solace in each other. And I was kind of good cop, bad cop kind of thing. Cause they were all right, he's going to get us, this week or whatever. But they found solace and comfort in their misery together. I always you have to let it happen organically, cause we tried doing that. There was one time where this actually particular girl was I've been very fortunate. I had a lot of plus heavyweights over the years, and she was a 2-time collegiate medalist, this girl. And all of a sudden I walks in, and I get Sarah Robles, who's a young kid.
Yeah.
And I knew her high school coach, and she was throwing at Arizona State. And I was like, hey, she's just here to really get better for throwing. And then Sarah came in. I'm like, holy shit, day one. Actually, she called me. She texted me. This is back when text messages used to charge you. And I was like, man, I'm returning this. Text is 25 cents. I could use this for something else. I returned a text. She came in. She did a workout on a Friday. I said, the last day to qualify for juniors was Saturday. I was the LWC president. I put a sanction in. We had a meet on Saturday to qualify her. 4 weeks later, she's at junior nationals, takes third. 3 months later, she's on the junior world team as an alternate, and she takes second in the world. But I told the girl, I was like, hey man, this girl's really good. She could be good for you. And she's like, nah, I don't need a teammate that can push me. I have other people. I'm like, no, you don't. This girl's really good. And she's making like weekly progress. And but I've had other situations like that. We had 3 heavyweights at a different time period. I'm like, listen, you girls are all cranking. And sometimes they can't handle it. Some people, they can't handle it. And they're like to the point where they don't like each other at all. To the point where they are like, listen, we don't even like each other and we don't want to be around each other at all. And that was always a challenge too. Some people if they're too close and it's too competitive, then there's animosity, and we're private. It's not like we're a training center like the OTC, at the time, or some of these other places where that's part of it. You have to understand that, like back in the day at the Olympic Training Center, you had Natalie Wolfhook or Natalie Bergner and Carissa Gordon or Gump training side by side each other, trying to make an Olympic team together, going for American records. And your biggest competitor is 3 feet away from you. Now they're friends, they were cordial, but you don't think every day they were just like, fuck, this is my meal ticket is sitting right next to me. I got to beat this every day. So in one way it was good, one way was that. Now, if you had a whole gym like that, that'd be different in terms of managing egos and everything. So that's a little bit different situation. So you got to be just cool with that.
One of the questions I have for you is, right now at Performance One, you guys do all types of things from Olympic weightlifting to powerlifting to youth athletics and sports performance. How do you keep it all in balance? Like as you're doing all these different things, we always hear in the business sector, like find your niche and lean into that, do one thing great. How do you do all these things great?
Well, again, first was strength and conditioning, and then weightlifting was a side thing. And then weightlifting grew. And with our strength and conditioning, every strength and conditioning athlete does some form of Olympic lifting. So from a teaching standpoint, somebody would walk in the gym and be like, well, who's the weightlifter and who's the football player? I'm like, technically I teach everybody the same. Now the volume and the intensity and the frequency of those movements changes the more you're an Olympic weightlifter. But give me 1 second. We'll change. So at first it was those 2 things. And then we had some general fitness in there, which wasn't that hard. It was just taking out the Olympic lifting movements and some of the strength and conditioning stuff. So we would get that. So then we would get, all right, the football player who transitioned into the weightlifter. We would get the athlete that would be 3 sports. He would be a football player, be a weightlifter, maybe be a track kid, then a wrestler, then a weightlifter. And then again, they got done and they wanted to continue with weightlifting. Then we started finding just pure weightlifters, so that was a big thing. Powerlifting, just because I've always had a little bit of the background in it, and more when the popularity of raw, or I would say minimal equipment, kind of took off in the last like 10 years or so, more people showed interest in that. And especially with our weightlifters, some people were like, come to us for weightlifting. I'm like, man, I want to be a weightlifter. I'm like, you suck. Like, this is not going to happen anytime this year, anytime your lifetime. I said, but you're really strong, So we got 2 gals that are in that boat right now. They're a little bit older, but they're strong, so we're like, hey, let's keep you around. You're nice people, the programming for that is not that much crazier than what we're doing. Now, if it was equipped, I would say, listen, go find somebody else. Cause that's a whole other sport in itself. And I'm not, I tried to help a couple guys with that. And I was like, this sucks.
Maybe 2 of 10 people that do equipped powerlifting though.
An hour to get this bench shirt on the guy because he's like, I just want to feel 650. I just want to feel it. And then we put 550 on his chest and didn't even touch his chest. I'm like, dude, I don't want a sport where you put 550 pounds and he could not bring the bar to his chest. I'm like, what? And I was like, dude, this is not for me. I'm like, it takes me for an hour of my day to friggin' help you get this thing on. But I was like, I don't want to do this. I was like, but the other stuff was easier. It was more, the programming was easier. The understanding of the recovery, when you're doing equipment, you got to study the equipment. You got to, when your shirt is standing on the floor by itself over there, like a suit of armor, I'm like, I had guys that come in and be like 300-pound bench presser. And they tell me with all their equipment, they're a 600-pound bench presser. We just throw them. I'd be like, what? Like, how do you program for that? It was something I wasn't willing to get into, kind of like a CrossFitter. I'm like, I could study it. I really could, but I'm like, I don't. My mental bandwidth right now is strength and conditioning, sports performance, and these 2. So we kind of, then had that. We had success. And my thing was referrals. You got referrals from our athletes that did well in the strength and conditioning community, locally, college, high school, and then the other one, and then you're rock and roll. And now we've been doing it. Now we have the kids of the kids that we trained. Some of the kids that we've trained that, now are moms and dads are like, go to Joe, do that. But we were able to balance it. Now I'm taking on more of a role of now the athletes, all my coaches were athletes under me. So the shortest time period is 8 years that someone's been with me. So now they understand my system. They understand the technique. They understand what I want. So then I've now delegated a beginner's weightlifting class. I've delegated a beginner's strength and conditioning class to a coach. And the eventual goal is to do that even with intermediate programs. And then I just kind of oversee stuff. And then I just kind of work with the special kids, meaning people who have talent, not special needs, but
Not
kid
special
that
like
had,
you.
we do
Yeah.
that too. We did that too. But the kids that have like something, and then say, hey, I pull a kid like this 10-year-old, I pulled him aside and I talked to his mom. I said, he's got something special, and I want to work with him because I feel that not that my other coaches couldn't, but I just want to give him that. I want to see. And then we just had a kid that was a top junior lifter that moved here from Minnesota. I'm doing some remote stuff with a girl who's an elite youth lifter from Canada. She's getting ready to go to the youth Pan Ams here. But, now we're starting to get more and more of that. And, but just have my bandwidth with those people and get really, because when I do it, like all my programs for my lifters are individualized for my more upper echelon. So there's thought, there's thinking that goes into what I would write for Max would be different than I would write, Zerwinski, because I got to analyze Max, his mechanics, what he's good at, what he's not good at, Now they can train alongside each other. And now they may be doing both snatches, but it may be just Max got to do something else first, or his percentages. He may not be able to handle the workload, or he may be able to handle the workload, or he needs more workload than other people. And that was kind of the, finding what ticks with some people. Some coaches just say everybody elite levels. That's what used to kill me even at our training center. It was like everybody did the same shit. And I was just like, Shane Hammett cannot be doing the same thing as Legrand Sakamaki's doing, like, who was a 62 kilo lifter. I'm like, he can't, like, there's not the same like thing, like, why would you do that? Shane is strong. Like, if he never squatted again, it would probably be okay, but he needs to do other things, technical understanding. I always say, like a Shane, I would say, like, he actually doesn't need to be here. He needs to be in other gyms and other places where he's not the biggest, strongest guy. He needs to be shown like there's other strong guys. And we never did that. So it's finding that niche for those people and trying to, do that. That's what I'm now more gravitating towards, is trying to understand that and saying, all right, how do we logistically put this together? I interviewed for the national club a long time ago. And that was one of the things I told the guys at the OTC. I said, we need to create a room that's super competitive all the time. If that means we leave this room and go other places, we need to do that. Or it means we bring people in to push the people here. Great. We send them out. They were getting too used to being here, and they got too soft, and I'll say it straight up 10 times. They were soft as shit. So anyway, sorry.
No, that's perfect. Do you think that, it sounds like your biggest strength, the thing you really lean on, is a lot of like problem solving. You're looking at every person that comes to the door and saying, what's the thing that's going to make this person get to the next level? How can I like find the next most important thing and work on that? Shane Hammond, we need to get him somewhere else. Do you feel like that kind of process that is lost a little bit now? Like we don't have that as much in coaching, or is that something that is still pretty prevalent? Like the sort of feels to me sometimes like there's a lot of cookie cutter stuff out there, and there's a lot of like, it's all about selling the next thing. Hey, get this out. Here's our template, go do it, be a part of our team, put the badge on, buy the shirt, get everything, bing, bang, boom, you're in, and that's it. Versus you're talking about like looking at a person, taking time, studying them, crafting something for that person, and really being a problem solver for every single person. Where do you feel like the general state of coaching is in that regard?
We're just what you said, everyone is now fast money template. I'm a coach. We had a girl in Arizona. She had just went to one youth national meet and she was writing programs at 17 years old. I'm like, you don't know shit. Like, what are you going to write? What your coach just told you to write, and you're just going to sell it for $25 a month. There's something to be said about our coaching education in America sucks. USA Weightlifting does a horrible job about it. They've always done it. I've given them some suggestions about that. They don't give a shit. There's coaching. Our sport is very unique because you have to know a tremendous amount of base science, biomechanics, biology, physiology of the human body, psychology. You have to understand human movement and control. You have to understand how people learn and how they absorb information, whether you're a whole method learner and teacher, or a part method. And that's how your program is. And then from there, like I said, there's something about when I would do coaching courses, it'd be everything from like where you stand, how many cues, what are you looking at, where are you looking at, and then they did 5 things wrong. When are you going to give them that feedback? That takes time. And yes, I think observation is huge. And I don't think a lot of coaches just watch. When I would go to these meets or even international meets, everyone's like I said, out drinking or eating. And I'm like, I'm sitting here watching. I'm going to the training hall. I'm watching. I'm watching the interaction between the coach. I'm watching the interaction between which athletes wrote down everything that they did, which athletes they took light sets off. They had like a professionalism to them from set 1 to set 20. Who would like show off in the training hall and then shit the bed in the competition. You're going, hey, last time I checked, it's more about what happens on the competition platform than does what you did in the training hall. But then just really observing. When I came into this sport, like, maybe because when I came from wrestling, I would sit and watch, I would sit and watch and learn about what was going on and then learning how these kids do it. But I think that's lost. I think it needs to be there. I think coaches really need that. You just can't, to find, if you're in a room with 50 people, you can't write 50 individual programs, but you have to say, all right, who needs a little something extra, and who needs this? You have to be able to say, hey, this is our foundation. This is our foundation-based program. And then when you start moving out of that, you got to say, okay, you need to do this a little bit more. Who needs to do a muscle snatch more than this guy? Who needs to do this more? Who needs more hip work? So yeah, it just takes a lot of observation, but you have to mentor with someone who knows that and who's going to study that, how to mesh those two things together, and then just some people just have creative minds, I used to say Zygmunt Smolcher, who was one of our former national coaches, had phenomenal drills and exercises, but we used to butt heads. I would go into him. I'm like, listen, I understand why you do this. I understand why this drill exists. I don't believe in it. And you haven't sold me on why this should be implemented to a national athlete, and I was a big one. I had a coach in one of the teams that I worked for. He used to say that to me. He's like, if you can sell me on your idea of why I should implement your strength and conditioning modality to my football team, I will do it. But if I don't accept it, it's because you didn't do a good enough job to sell me of its effectiveness to the team and how we can't live without it. And I was like, fuck, I've applied that to like so many different things in my life that if I did not get what I wanted across, is because I wasn't effective enough of doing my research or showing them why it was. And Zygmunt he didn't do that with certain drills. I'm not saying everything. With certain things, he was just like, well, we just do that. And I'm like, that's not a good enough answer. I understand we're doing this step out, jerk, lunge drill, but why? And why do we need to do it right now? And that I'm a big why guy. I want to know why. And then not only why we're doing it now, but why am I doing it for a progression of down the road? Coming into it with that kind of curiosity and that question without being like constantly question everybody, but I would want to know. Like we used to do all this testing of all our youth and juniors at the Olympic Training Center. We do all this like performance testing, vertical, sprints, this, that, and the other thing, measurements. And I'd go, oh, great. We're going to go over all this stuff and create a database. And we're going to do profiles and do projections for these kids so that we want to see where they're at 6 months from now into a year. We're like, no, what the fuck did we do all this shit for? Why do we spend a half a day doing all this testing? We're not going to fucking go over any of this shit and create a portfolio for each kid and give him suggestions and and tell their personal coach what we think. And I'm like, the fuck are we doing? I'm like, so shit like that. Like I said, I feel that coaching has to take a big step forward in that. I've done it. That's why I kind of left teaching USA weightlifting courses because I didn't agree with any of it. I said, this is not what other countries are doing. And the people that are writing our coaching curriculum, well, the fuck they're doing. They never produced anybody. There's no even scientific background of any of the shit that they're doing for Americans. Some of it would be like, okay, this is good. Okay, well, have you done anything to say why we're doing this? No. Have you done any research why we suck at snatching or why we're missing this many percentage of first attempts? Or, the way the manual was really originally written, it was like, wow, if you got a kid at 12, well, how many people get kids at 12 and how many people get transfer athletes in other sports, CrossFit, whatever, the other thing? There is to be a different pipeline stream of how you're going to introduce those kids. We never did that. Anyway, I do stuff like that. I believe in that. I believe in developing that athlete and understanding that. And that's helped me survive. Honestly, if I just did with just some of that basic understanding of the coaching manual was, I don't think I'd be successful. When you're private, if you don't produce, you're dead. You could hide at a college, you could hide at a high school, shit, you could hide at a training center for a while. but in a private situation, if you're not producing results, whether it's weightlifting or strength and conditioning, those athletes and their parents and those people who are paying don't see the results. A pro athlete doesn't see that you're actually benefiting them. You're not going to get paid. They're going to say, peace out, or you're not keeping up with some of the, the newer things, I couldn't tell you how many times I had a parent ask me about velocity-based training, and I had to go, Jesus Christ. I'm like, do you even know what this is? I'm like, your kid's 10. He doesn't need velocity-based training at 10.
I think that's
yeah.
a great point. Like, there's a great point in that it's a lot of times people get caught up in the details and they miss the bigger picture, right? Which is like, it's execution, right? It's can you show up? Can you deliver? Can you get the athlete to do something? But to your point of like hiding, anyone who's run a business, anyone who's done coaching professionally, had a gym, any of these things, like the greatest, I say this a lot, but like the greatest coaching cue you're going to get is 3 red lights, right? And like you know right away, everything I did was wrong, right? There's something wrong with the gym and that thing. It's the same idea. It's like, right away whether you're doing things right or wrong because you're making more money or you're losing people. If people start coming to your gym and they quit after a few weeks, you realize like, hey, I'm not delivering what I said I was, or I'm doing things wrong. Like, you just get feedback that's unavoidable. You can't help but have to like acknowledge like, hey, people don't want this, or I'm not doing the thing I said I'm gonna do, whatever it is. And so you can't hide in a private setting in a for-profit business because there's just nowhere to go when you have to confront at the end of the month why you've got no more money or why you're not getting more clients or why everyone's quitting, right? It's a painful kind of truth. It's a painful kind of experience to go through. But if you have a thick enough skin, I think it's the kind of thing that it just produces better coaches. I mean, once the OTC shut down and everything went kind of private and everyone went the route of having their own coach and was doing it in that setting, people moved around a lot. They didn't have to stay there. If you thought there was a better coach, go there. And all things aside, however that goes, the reality is it produces better results. I mean, we have Olympic champions now, another Olympic champion now post training center. And we're doing better in general on the women's side than we've been done in the past. And you have to acknowledge that there's got to be some kind of connection between the fact that we don't have a centralized thing that maybe isn't working for everybody. And when everyone's, put in a spot where they've got a coach who's got to make money and got to grow a club and does this professionally, like they have to deliver.
And as we start to round out here, one of the things I want to ask you, Joe, you've been in the game for a long time. I want to talk about burnout. I think a lot of coaches sort of burn out in this industry. I think because maybe sometimes there's a ceiling of achievement that we can reach, or if we're not building a bigger business, it's like we get stuck. What have you done to stave off burnout? Have you gone through periods of burnout? What does that look like?
Well, it's very easy. I'm divorced for a reason. Not that I'm saying I'm not the nicest, cheeriest guy in the world, but I put coaching first, and I made a lot of sacrifices, and I struggle with that. To go, all right, if I didn't make those sacrifices, I didn't work 13-hour days, I didn't take all these trips, I do all these things. What I have learned as much, if you look at, there's a great book by Malcolm Gladwell called Outliers, and in there he looks at people that did a lot of different training that were outliers and what made them special. And there was another book by Daniel Cole about the talent code. And he talks about these hotbeds of people that devoted a lot of their time to a certain skill set or profession, whether it be the guys that started Apple Computer or tennis coaches or whatever. And they said they made a lot of sacrifices and they devoted a lot of time to learning their skill set. And with coaching in any profession, I would look at all those people that were very successful. I bet their personal life sucked at some point. So my advice to a lot of young coaches now is you got to walk away at 12 hours. You got to walk away at 10 hours. You got to walk away. And you do have to spend time with your family. Like I do a lot of hiking. I'm at a position now where now because of the divorce, I'm like, all right, I'm going to leave early. Like right now, I don't go in early on Thursdays. I kind of built it into the schedule saying, hey, I'm not going to come in here early. Certain days like I'm going to leave early. And like me leaving early is 6:30 and I'm going at night. And they're like, and then I go home and I'm going like, what the fuck am I doing here? But then you have to go like, I had to do that. So now I just replace that by going on a 3-4 hour hike, but it clears my mind, and I tell people that you do have to have some things outside of the gym, because I would leave the gym and I would study. I'd leave the gym. People are like, oh, did you read the new Brian Grisham novel about some bullshit. I'm like, no, dude, I read scientific journals. I read sports psychology. I read, some Russian guy doing some crazy thing, with programming. And they're going, what? Like, you don't read something for fun, for fiction? I'm like, no, I don't fucking have time for that shit. Like, I only read shit that helps me get better at what I'm doing. So, I still don't read fiction, but I'm at the same time, I've allowed more time, to do that, and to give that, to people, because, to do this the right way, you have to have that mindset. I don't give a shit. Like I said, if you want to be like, I'm only open 3 hours a day and I want to go hunting and fishing all the time, and like, that's fine, but you're not going to be as successful, so there is a trade-off, but there is a time where you could just take it overboard. You know what I mean? Like, I could be at the gym 13 hours straight, and people be like, now, am I coaching for 13 hours straight? No, it's either you're coaching, I'm programming, I'm coaching, I'm contemplating, I'm reflecting on what just this training session just did. I'm big into probability factors and going, all right, this equates to this. This amount of training load now, based off of this trajectory chart, should elicit a positive result down here if all these factors go in there, and cracking that mathematical code of a human being trying to able to stay on track to do that. Oh, by the way, they're a human themselves and they got in a fight with their boyfriend or this, that, and the other thing. And you're going, fuck. But that's part of the game, So yeah, go for hikes, do something, yoga, Tai Chi, whatever the fuck you got to do. You got to do something outside. I would not rely on alcohol. I would not rely on other things to decompress, because if you don't spend time with those loved ones in your life, it does help if they're involved, but even at the same time, even if your wife is girlfriend or boyfriend is in the gym, at some point, they're going to get on your fucking nerves. So you got to have something that's aside from that, and you have to have something that you come home or wherever you do, you're not talking about it, like you're not talking about it. You got to do something else. So that's my biggest advice to young coaches. Like I said, if you do that, have some like date night or whatever, you got to fill in and say, just you put that in your schedule, just like you put a training session in, like, this is I'm done. Don't talk to me. Sundays. That's why Sundays with other countries, they actually do shit, and I would be like, no, I can't. Not even because of religious reasons. It would just be like, I just can't. I don't want to see you. I'll kill you if I see you on Sunday.
Well, I appreciate your time, Joe. This has been an awesome episode. You've got so much knowledge, so much history in this thing. Appreciate you being on. And it's been a great conversation.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, and just let me know when it'd be on and the link, and we can kind of on our end send it on as well.
Absolutely.
Awesome.